it. Get into it. Yes. We're back. Hi, lovelies. My selfie light is out, but my stand is still working. I'm back. I am back. I know we have a lot to catch up on. I am going to read two chapters for you this afternoon. I want to say thank you to all my friends and family that have checked on me. I lost a really good friend of mine who is a very well-loved member of the village. For those who know, you know. Rest in peace to my friend Frank. When I found out the news, that's what caused me to lose my voice. I ended up getting a bit upset and crying and screaming to the point where I lost my voice for 3 days. And then it took a long time for me to even be able to reach my normal octaves for certain characters. And I needed to take that break. I needed to take that time to grieve and to take care of other personal matters in my life. I needed to take that time to heal. And I wasn't trying to force myself to try to do story time in the midst of pain. So hence why I took the break. So I do appreciate those who have been patient. This has been incredibly helpful to take the time for myself, to heal myself, to be surrounded by people who love me. So again, those who have been checking in, I appreciate you. Thank you. So like I said, I try to fix my selfie light. Right now, the light is not even coming on. I still have the stand, so you can still see me, but I will get a new one, a brand new one eventually. I've had this for I want to say I've had this one for 4 years. So yeah, it's about time for a new one, but let's go ahead and get started. Last time we were here, we were jumping in between chapters because, Chapter 4, 5, and 6 are not to be read in sequential order. You can read them at any point, so I always go with the ladies first. We already read Violet's half of the story, Sunny's half, and now we're on to Klaus, the middle child. How fitting, me being a middle child. Excuse me. Let's get into it. Chapter 5. When the elevator reached the 6th story, Klaus bade goodbye to Violet and stepped out onto a long, empty hallway. The hallway was lined with numbered doors, odd numbers on one side and even numbers on the other, and large ornamental vases, too large to hold flowers and too small to hold spies. On the floor was a smooth gray carpet that muffled each of the middle Baudelaire's uncertain steps. Although Klaus had never set foot in the Hotel Denouement before today, walking down the hallway gave him a familiar feeling. It was the feeling he had whenever he entered a library with an important problem to solve. Suspecting that somewhere within the library's collection of books was the perfect answer to whatever question was foremost on his mind. He had this feeling when he and his siblings were living just off Lousy Lane and he solved the murder of Uncle Monty with crucial information he discovered in a herpetological library. There we go. Just didn't like the way that was angled. There we go. That's better. He had this feeling when he and his siblings were deep in the ocean and he managed to dilute the poison infecting Sunny by finding a significant fact in a mycological library belonging to Fiona, a young woman who had broken Klaus's heart. And as soon as he stood in the hallway gazing at all the numbered doors that stretched out as far as his eye could see, Klaus Baudelaire had the feeling again. Hidden somewhere in this hotel, he was sure, was something or someone that could answer all the Baudelaire's questions, solve all of the Baudelaire's mysteries, and put an end at last to all the Baudelaire's woes. It was as if he could hear this answer calling to him like a baby crying at the bottom of a damp well, or an alarm clock ringing underneath a heap of damp blankets. Without a catalog, however, Klaus had no idea where such a solution might be, so he made his way toward his concierge errand in room 674, hoping that whatever he would observe as a flanier might bring him closer to unraveling the Baudelaire's list of misfortunes. When he stopped in front of the numbered door, however, it appeared that he was only adding another misfortune to this woeful list. Smoke was pouring out of the gap between the door and the floor, spreading out across the hallway like a sinister stain. "Hello?" Klaus called, knocking on the door. Hello yourself, called back a voice that sounded slightly familiar and utterly unconcerned. Are you one of those concertinas? I'm a concierge, Klaus said, not bothering to explain that a concertina is a kind of accordion. Can I be of assistance? Of course you can be of assistance, the voice called back. That's why I rang for you. Enter at once. Klaus, of course, did not want to enter a room that was filled with smoke, but working even for the purposes of secretly observing the mysteries of a hotel usually means doing things you do not want to do. So the middle Baudelaire opened the door, releasing an enormous amount of smoke into the hallway, and took a few hesitant steps into the room. Through the smoke, he could see a short figure dressed in a suit of shiny green cloth standing at the far end of the room facing the window. Behind his back, he held a cigar that was clearly responsible for all the smoke wafting past Klaus into the hallway. But Klaus did not care about the smoke. He hardly even noticed it. He merely stared in dismay at the person standing at the window, a person he had hoped he would never see again. You have probably heard the tiresome expression, "It's a small world," which people use to explain a coincidence. For instance, if you walk into an Italian restaurant and encounter a waiter you recognize, the waiter might cry, "It's a small world," as if it were unavoidable that the two of you would be at the same restaurant at the same time. But if you've ever taken even the shortest of walks, you know the truth of the matter. It is not a small world. It is a large world, and there are Italian restaurants sprinkled all over it, employing waiters who have crucial messages for you, and the waiters who are trying to make sure you never receive them. And these pair of waiters are engaged in an argument that began many years ago when you were so young that you were not safe to feed you even the softest of gnocchi, which is a great Italian dish. It's a potato dish, and it's wonderful. The world is not small but enormous, and Klaus had hoped that this enormous world was big enough that a guest of the Hôtel Dénouement employed in the lumber industry staying in room 674 would not be the horrid man who had employed him and his sisters at Lucky Smell's lumber mill. During their dreadful stay at Poultryville, the Baudelaires never saw the man's face, which was always covered by a cloud of smoke from his cigar, and they never learned the man's real name, which was so difficult to pronounce that he made everyone call him Sir. But they learned plenty about his greedy and cruel behavior, and Klaus was not happy to learn that this enormous world was going to treat him to another helping of Sir's selfishness. Well, don't just stand there, Sir shouted. Ask what you can do for me. What can I do for you, sir? Klaus asked. Sir whirled around, and the cloud around his head whirled around too. How did you know my name? He asked suspiciously. The concierge didn't know your name, said another voice patiently, and Klaus saw through the smoke a second person he had not noticed, sitting on the bed in a bathrobe with Hôtel Dénouement embroidered on the back. This man was also familiar with the Baudelaire's days at Lucky Smells, although Klaus did not know whether to be happy to see him or not. On one hand, Charles had always been kind to the children, and although his kindness had not been enough to save them from danger, it is always a relief to discover that there is a kind person in the room that you have not yet noticed previously. On the other hand, however, Klaus was sorry to see that Charles was still partners with Sir, which enjoyed bossing around Charles as much as he did the Baudelaire's. I'm sure the concierge calls all the male guests in this hotel, sir. Of course he does, Sir shouted. I'm not an idiot. Now then, Concertina, we want to be taken to the sauna right away. Yes, sir, Klaus said, grateful that either Frank or Ernest had mentioned that the sauna was in room 613. A sauna is a room constructed out of wood and kept very, very hot, in which people can sit and steam, which is believed to be beneficial to one's health, which is very true, as I know from personal experience. Klaus would have found it very difficult to find such a room in the Hôtel Dénouement without a catalogue. The sauna should be down the hall on the opposite side, Klaus said. If you gentlemen will follow me, I'll take you there. I'm sorry we made you come all the way to our rooms just to take us right down the hall, Klaus said. It's my pleasure, Klaus said. As I'm sure you know, when people say, it's my pleasure, they usually mean something along the lines of, there's nothing on earth I would rather do less. But the middle Baudelaire was hoping that he would learn why the Baudelaire's former guardian and his partner had journeyed from Poultryville to the Hôtel Dénouement. Let's go this very instant, Sir shouted, marching out into the hallway. Don't you want to change into a bathing suit? Charles asked. If you're fully clothed, you won't get the health benefits of the steam. I don't care about the health benefits of the steam, Sir shouted. I'm not an idiot. I just love the smell of hot wood. Charles sighed and followed Klaus out of room 674 into the hallway. I was hoping my partner would relax during our stay here, he said, but I'm afraid he's taking a busman's holiday. A busman's holiday is an expression which refers to when people do the same thing on vacation that they do in their everyday lives, such as plumbers who visit the Museum of Sinks or villains who disguise themselves even on their days off. But Klaus could not believe that these two men were merely vacationing in the Hotel Denouement just 2 days before VFD was to gather. Are you here on business? He asked, hoping that Charles would keep talking as they approached the sauna. Don't tell that concertina anything, Sir cried, continuing to use the word for accordion instead of the word for hotel employee. He's supposed to be at our beck and call, not nosing around in our business like a spy. Forgive me, sir, Klaus said as calmly as he could. We've arrived at the sauna. Sure enough, Klaus, sir, and Charles had arrived at room 613, which had a mass of steam pouring out of the gap between the door and the floor, like a mirror image of Sir's cigar smoke pouring out of room 674. You can wait outside, concertina, said Sir. We'll shout for you when we're ready to be escorted back to our room. We don't need to be escorted, Charles said, timidly opened the door. Inside, Klaus could see nothing but a mass of whirling steam. It's just down the hallway. I'm sure the concierge has enough to do without waiting around for us. But somewhere has to hold my cigar, Sir shouted. I can't walk into a room full of steam with a head full of smoke. I'm not an idiot. Of course not, Charles said with a sigh, and walked into the sauna. Sir handed Klaus the cigar and strode into the sauna before the cloud of smoke around his head could clear. Behind him, the door started to close, but Klaus thought quickly and stuck out his foot. The door remained open just a crack, and as quietly as he could, he swung the door back open and slipped inside, pausing to balance Sir's cigar on the rim of one of the ornamental vases. As he suspected, the steam was so thick inside the sauna that he could not see Sir or his partner, which meant the Paltryville citizens could not see him either while they sat and talked in the heated room. It was a Flanier's perfect opportunity to eavesdrop on a private conversation. Uh-oh. I smudged the camera. Oh, yes, if you please. Oh, tiddly, tiddly, widdly. As Mr. Jackson from Beatrix Potter's The Tale of Mrs. Tittlemouse. It's a really good, cute story. We'll definitely read that sometime during the summer. The Wonderful World of Beatrix Potter. I think that'll be our summer reading probably after we finish this series. Although there is one other series I do want to get into after we finish this. That's really good. Keep that thought. Keep that thought. I wish you could be more polite, Charles said, his voice drifting through the steam. There was no reason to accuse that concierge of being a spy. I was just trying to be cautious, Sir said gruffly in a word which here means in a tone that indicated he had no intention of being polite. Klaus heard the crinkle of his shiny suit and imagined that the lumber mill owner was shrugging. You're the old one who said enemies might be lurking in this hotel. That's what I was told in the letter I received, Charles said. According to J.S., we must be very cautious if we want to find the Baudelaires. Klaus was grateful that his amazed expression was hidden in the steam. The middle Baudelaire could not imagine why the mysterious imposter J.S. was helping Charles find him and his sisters, and if it had not been so hot in the sauna, he would have broken out in a cold sweat, a phrase which here means felt very nervous about the conversation he was observing. I don't want to find the Baudelaires, Sir said. Those orphans are nothing but trouble for the lumber mill. They weren't the cause of the trouble, Charles said. Count Olaf was. Don't you remember? Of course I remember, Sir cried. I'm not an idiot. Count Olaf disguised himself as a rather attractive young lady and worked with that sinister hypnotist to cause accidents in my mill. If the Baudelaires didn't have that fortune waiting for them in the bank, Olaf never would have done all that mischief. It's the orphans' fault, which is not accurate logic. That's not accurate. I suppose you're right, Charles said, but I still would like to find them. According to the Daily Punctilio, the Baudelaires are in a heap of trouble. According to the Daily Punctilio, Sir said, the Baudelaires are murderers. For all we know, that bookworm with the eyeglasses could sneak up on us right here in the hotel and kill us to death. The children aren't going to murder us, Charles said, although after their experience at Lucky Mills, I can hardly blame them. In fact, if I manage to find them, the first thing I'll do is give them my sincere apologies. Perhaps I can ask one of the concierges for a pair of binoculars. J.S. said they might be arriving by submarine, so I can watch for a periscope rising from the sea.
I wish our room had a view of the pond instead, Sir said. When I'm done with a cigar, I like to drop the butt into a calm body of water and watch the pretty ripples.
I'm not sure that'd be good for the pond, Charles said.
What do I care about the pond? Sir demanded. I have better things to do than worry about the environment. The finite forest is running low on trees, so business is bad for the lumber mill. The last big order we had was for building that horseradish factory, and that was a very long time ago. I'm hoping Thursday's cocktail party will be an excellent opportunity to do some business. After all, if it weren't for my lumber, this hotel wouldn't even exist.
I remember, Charles said. We had to deliver the lumber in the middle of the night. But, sir, you told me you never heard from that organization again.
I didn't, Sir said, until now. You're not the only one that gets notes from this fellow J.S. I'm invited to a party he's hosting on Thursday night. He said I should bring all my valuables. That must mean plenty of rich people will be there. Rich people who might want to buy some lumber.
Perhaps as the lumber mill becomes more successful, Charles said, we could pay our employees with money instead of just gum and coupons.
Don't be an idiot, Sir said. Gum and coupons is a fair deal. If you spent less time reading and more time thinking about lumber, you'd care more about money and less about people.
There's nothing wrong with caring about people, Charles said quietly. I care about you, sir, and I care about the Baudelaires. If what J.S. wrote is true, then their parents... Excuse me. The door of the sauna swung open and Klaus saw a tall, dim figure step into the steam.
Is that my concertina? Sir barked. I told you to wait outside. No, I'm one of the managers of the hotel, said either Frank or Ernest. We do have a concertina available in room 786 if you're interested in musical instruments. I'm sorry to interrupt your afternoon, but I'm afraid I must ask all guests to vacate the sauna. A situation has arisen that requires the use of this room. If you're interested in steam, there's quite a bit in room... I don't care about steam, cried Sir. I just like smelling hot wood. Where else can I smell hot wood except in the sauna?
Room 547 is dedicated to organic chemistry, replied the manager. There are all sorts of smelly things here. Klaus quickly opened the sauna door and pretended to walk inside. I'd be happy to take our guest to room 547, he said, hoping to observe the rest of Sir and Charles's conversation. No, the manager said. You're needed here, concierge. By a strange coincidence, there happens to be a chemist standing in the hallway who'd be happy to escort these two gentlemen.
Oh, all right,
Sir said, stomped out of the sauna where a figure stood in a long white coat and a mask such as surgeons or chemists wear over their noses and mouths. Sir reached down and picked up his cigar from the ornamental vase, restoring the cloud of smoke to his face just as the cloud of steam evaporated. And without another word, he and his partner followed the chemist away from the sauna, leaving Klaus alone with the volunteer or villain. Be very careful with this, said either Frank or Ernest, handing a large, rigid object to Klaus. It was something flat and wide, rolled into a thick tube like a sleeping bag. When it's unrolled, the surface is very sticky, so sticky that anything it touches becomes trapped. Do you know what this is called? Flypaper? Klaus said, remembering a book he had read about the adventures of an exterminator. Is the hotel having an insect problem? Our problem is not with insects, the manager said. It's with birds. This is bird paper. I need you to attach one end to the windowsill of this room and dangle the rest outside over the pond. Can you guess why? To trap birds? Klaus said. You're obviously very well read, said Ernest or Frank, although it was impossible to tell whether he was impressed or disgusted with this fact. So you know that birds can cause all sorts of problems. For instance, I've heard about a swarm of eagles that recently stole a great crowd of children. What do you think of that? Klaus gasped. He knew, of course, exactly what he thought of this great swarm of eagles who had kidnapped a troop of snow scouts while the Baudelaires were living on Mount Fraught. He thought it was horrid, but the face on the volunteer villain was so unfathomable that the middle Baudelaire could not tell if the manager thought so too. I think it's remarkable, Klaus said, finally, carefully choosing a word which here means either wonderful or horrible. That's a remarkable answer, replied either Frank or Ernest, and then Klaus heard the manager sigh thoughtfully. Tell me, he said, are you who I think you are? Klaus blinked behind his glasses and behind the sunglasses that lay on top of them. Deciding on a safe answer to a question is like deciding on a safe ingredient in a sandwich, because if you make the wrong decision, you might find that something horrible is coming out of your mouth. As Klaus stood in the sauna, he wanted nothing more than to decide on a safe answer such as, yes, I'm Klaus Baudelaire, if he were talking to Frank, or, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about, if he were talking to Ernest. But he knew there was no way to tell if either of these answers were safe, so he opened his mouth and uttered the only answer he could think of. Of course I am who you think I am, he said, feeling as if he were talking code, although in code he did not know. I'm a concierge. I see, said Frank or Ernest, as unfathomable as ever. I'm grateful for your assistance, concierge. Not many people have the courage to help with a scheme like this. Without another word, the manager left and Klaus was alone in the sauna. Carefully, he walked through the steam and felt his way to the window, which he managed to unlatch and open, swinging in a shutter marked 6 out over the pond. As will happen when a very hot room is exposed to cold air, the steam raced through the window and evaporated. With the steam gone, Klaus could see the wooden walls and benches that compromised the sauna, and he only wished that everything was as clear in his own head as it was in room 613. In silence, he attached one end of the bird paper to the windowsill, his head spinning with his mysterious observations as a flaneur, and as his flaneur. Yeah. Denouement, flaneur. Okay, not flaneur. Flaneur. There we go. And his mysterious errand as a concierge, and in silence he dangled the rest outside where it curved stiffly over the pond like a slide at a playground. In silence he gazed at his strange arrangement and wondered what manager had requested such an odd task. But before he could leave the sauna, Klaus's silence was shattered by an enormous noise. The clock in the lobby of the Hotel Denouement is stuff of legend, a phrase which here means very famous for being very loud. It is located in the very center of the ceiling at the very top of the dome, and when the clock announces the hour, its bells clang throughout the entire building, making an immense deep noise that sounds like a certain word being uttered once for each hour. At this particular moment, it was 3 o'clock, and everyone in the hotel could hear the booming ring of the enormous bells of the clock, uttering them 3 times in succession. Wrong, wrong, wrong. As he turned away from the sauna's open window and walked back down the hall toward the elevator doors, Klaus Baudelaire felt as if the clocks were scolding him for his efforts at solving the mysteries of the Hotel Denouement. Wrong. He had tried his best to be a flaneur, but hadn't observed enough to know exactly what Sir and Charles were doing at the hotel. Wrong. He had tried to communicate with one of the hotel managers, but had been unable to discover whether it was Frank or Ernest. And most wrong of all, he had performed his errand as a concierge. Now a strip of bird paper was dangling out of the Hotel Denouement, where it would serve some unknown sinister purpose. With each stroke of the clock, Klaus felt wronger and wronger as he stepped inside the small elevator. He frowned in thought. He nearly hoped his 2 siblings had found more success in their errands, for as he walked through the sliding doors and pressed the button to return to the lobby, all the middle Baudelaire could think was that everything was wrong, wrong, wrong. Okay, I gotta go. Okay. Chapter 7. Quite a few things happened that day after the clock struck 3, and each wrong echoed throughout the immense and perplexing world of the Hotel Denouement. On the 9th story, a woman was suddenly recognized by a chemist, and the 2 of them had a fit of giggles. In the basement, a strange sight was reported by an ambidextrous man who spoke into a walkie-talkie. On the 6th story, one of the housekeepers removed a disguise and drilled a hole behind an ornamental vase in order to examine the cables that held one of the elevators in place. while listening to the faint sound of a very annoying song coming from a room just above her. In room 296, a volunteer suddenly realized that the Hebrew language is read from right to left rather than left to right, which meant that it should be read from left to right rather than right to left in the mirror. And in the coffee shop located in room 178, a villain requested sugar in his coffee, was immediately thrown to the floor so a waitress could see if he had a tattoo on his ankle, and then received an apology and a free slice of rhubarb pie for all his trouble. In room 174, a banker picked up the phone only to find no one on the line, and in room 594, his family sat unnoticed among tanks of tropical fish, with only a suitcase of dirty laundry for company, unaware that underneath a cushion of a sofa in the lobby was the doily for which they had been searching for more than 9 years. Just outside the hotel, a taxi driver gazed down at the funnel spouting steam into the sky, and wondering if a certain man with an unusually shaped back would ever return and claim the suitcases that still lay in the truck. And on the other side of the hotel, a woman in a diving helmet and a shiny suit shone a flashlight through the water and tried to see to the murky bottom of the sea. At the opposite end of the city, a long black automobile took a woman away from a man she loved. And in another city, miles and miles from the Baudelaires, 4 children played at the beach, unaware that they were about to receive some very dreadful news. And yet in another city, neither the one where the Baudelaires lived nor the one I just mentioned, someone else learned something, and there was some sort of fuss, or so I would have led to believe. With each wrong of the clock, as the afternoon slipped into evening, countless things happened, not only in the immense and perplexing world of the Hotel Denouement, but also in the immense and perplexing world that lay outside its brick walls. But the Baudelaire orphans didn't think of any of these things. Curiously, their errands as concierges kept them in the lobby for the rest of the afternoon, so they had no more occasion to venture into the small elevators and observe anything further as flaneurs, and spent the hours fetching them things back and forth across the lobby. But the siblings did not think of the objects they were fetching, or the guests who were waiting for them, or even the tall, skinny figure of either Frank or Ernest, who would occasionally rush by them on errands of his own. As the evening approached, and the bells behind the desk rang less and less frequently, Violet, Klaus, and Sunny thought only of the things that had happened to them. They thought only of what each of them had observed, and they wondered what in the world it all might mean. Finally, just as either Frank or Ernest had predicted, night arrived and the hotel grew very quiet, and the 3 siblings gathered behind the large wooden desk to talk, leaning their backs against the wall and stretching out their legs until their feet almost touched the bells. Violet told the story of Esme Squalor, Carmelita Spatz, and Geraldine Julien in the rooftop sunbathing salon, and either Frank or Ernest in the lobby. Klaus told the story of Sir and Charles in room 674, and either Frank or Ernest in the sauna, and Sunny told the story of Vice Principal Nero, Mr. Remora, Mrs. Bass, in room 371. And either Frank or Ernest and Hal in the Indian restaurant in room 954. Klaus took careful note of everything in his commonplace book, giving the book to Violet when he was in his turn to speak, and all 3 Baudelaires interrupted each other with questions and ideas. But when all the stories had been told and the children looked at the countless details inked onto the paper, everything that happened to them was as mysterious as it had been that morning. It just doesn't make any sense, Violet said. Why is Esme Squalor planning a party? Why did Carmelita Spatz request a harpoon gun? Why are Sir and Charles here? Klaus asked. Why is there bird paper hanging out of the window of the sauna? Why Nero? Sunny asked. Why Remora? Why Bass? Why Hal? Who is J.S.? Violet asked. Is he a man lurking in the basement, or is she a woman watching the skies? Where is Count Olaf? Klaus asked. Why has he invited so many of our former guardians here to the hotel? Frankernest, Sunny said, and this was perhaps the most mysterious question of all. Violet, Klaus, and Sunny had been encountered one of the managers just moments before the clock struck 3. Kit Snicket had told them that if they observed everyone they saw, they could tell the villains from the volunteers, but the Baudelaires did not know which sibling had encountered which manager, and they simply could not imagine how 2 people could be in 3 places at once. The Baudelaires pondered their situation in a silence broken only by a strange, repetitive sound that seemed to be coming from outside. For a moment, the sound was not yet another mystery, but the siblings soon realized it was the croaking of frogs. The pond must have thousands of frogs living in its depths, and now that night had arrived, the frogs had come to the surface and were communicating with one another in the guttural sound of their species. It was an unfathomable sound, as if in the modern world were a code the Baudelaires could not decipher. Ribbit, ribbit. Ribbit, ribbit, frogs ribbit. Toads do not ribbit. Toads croak. Kit said that all would not go well, Violet said. She said our errands may be noble, but that we would not succeed.
That's true, agreed Klaus. She said all our hopes would go up in smoke, and maybe she was right. We each observed a different story, but none of the stories makes any sense.
Elephant,
Sunny said. Violet and Klaus looked at their sister curiously.
poem, she said. Father.
Violet and Klaus looked at one another in puzzlement.
Elephant,
Sunny insisted, but this was one of the rare occasions that Violet and Klaus did not understand what their sister was saying. After all this time. Now y'all can't understand what, you know what? I'm calling shenanigans. Shenanigans! The brow furrowed on Sunny's little forehead as she struggled to remember something that might have made herself clear to her siblings. Finally, she looked up at Violet and Klaus.
John Godfrey Saxe,
she said, and all three Baudelaires smiled. The name John Godfrey Saxe is not likely to mean anything to you unless you're a fan of American humorist poets of the 19th century. There are not many such people in the world, but the Baudelaires' father was one of them and had several poems committed to memory. From time to time, he would get into a whimsical mood. The word whimsical, as you probably know, means odd and impulsive, and would grab the nearest Baudelaire child, bounce him or her up and down on his lap, and recite a poem by John Godfrey Saxe about an elephant. In the poem, 6 blind men encountered an elephant for the first time when unable to agree on what the animal was like. The first man felt the tail, smooth side of the elephant, and concluded that an elephant was like a wall. The second man felt the tusk of the elephant and decided that an elephant resembled a spear. The third man felt the trunk of the elephant, and the fourth felt one of the elephant's legs, and so on, with all the blind men bickering over what an elephant was like. As with many children, Violet and Klaus had grown old enough to find their father's whimsical moods a little embarrassing. So Sunny had become the primary audience for Mr. Baudelaire's poetry recital and remembered the poems best. That poem could have been written about us, Violet said. We've each observed one tiny part of the puzzle, but none of us has seen the entire thing. Nobody can see the entire thing, Klaus said. There's a mystery behind every door at the Hotel Denouement, and nobody can be everywhere at once, observing all the volunteers and all the villains. We still got to try, Violet said. Klaus said that the sugar bowl was on its way to this hotel. Excuse me, Kit said. We have to stop it from falling into the hands of the imposter. But the sugar bowl could be hidden anywhere, Klaus said. And the imposter could be anyone. Everyone we've observed was talking about JS, but we still don't know who he or she is.
Each was partly in the right,
Sunny recited, but from the penultimate verse of the elephant poem, her siblings smiled and chimed in to finish the line. And all were in the wrong, they said together, but the last word was drowned out by another sound, or perhaps it would be more proper to say that the last wrong was drowned out by another. Wrong, called the clock of the Hotel Denouement. Wrong, 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 wrong. Wrong. It's late, Klaus said as the 12th wrong faded. I hadn't realized we'd been talking for so long. He and his sister stood up and stretched and saw that the lobby had grown empty and silent. The lid of the grand piano was closed, the cascading fountain had been turned off, even the reception desk was empty, as if the Hotel Denouement was not expecting any more guests until the morning. The light from the frog-shaped lamp, and of course the Baudelaires themselves, were the only signs of life underneath the enormous domed ceiling. I guess the guests are asleep, Violet said. Or they're staying up all night reading, like Frank said.
or Ernest,
Sunny reminded her. Maybe we should try to sleep as well, Klaus said. We have one more day to solve these mysteries, and we should be well rested when that day arrives. I suppose there won't be much to observe after dark, Violet said.
Tired,
Sunny yawned. The siblings nodded, but all 3 siblings just stood there. It did not seem right to sleep when so many enemies were lurking around the hotel hatching sinister plots, but such events go on every night, not just in the Hotel Denouement, but all over the world, and even the noblest of volunteers needs to get a little shut-eye. A phrase which here means lie down behind a large wooden desk and hope that nobody rings for the concierge until morning. The children would have preferred more comfortable sleeping circumstances, of course, but it had been a very long time since such circumstances were available, and so without further discussion, they bid one another good night, and Klaus reached up and turned off the frog-shaped lamp. For a moment, the 3 children lay there in the darkness, listening to the croaking coming from the pond outside.
It's dark,
Sunny said. The youngest Baudelaire was not particularly afraid of the dark, but just felt like mentioning it in case her siblings were nervous.
It is dark,
Violet agreed with a yawn. With my
sunglasses on. It's as dark as... What did Kid Snicket say? As dark as a crow flying through a pitch-black night. That's it, Klaus said suddenly. His sisters heard him standing up in the dark, and then he turned the frog lamp back on, making them both blink behind their sunglasses. What's it? Violet said. I thought we were going to sleep. How can we sleep? Klaus asked, when the sugar bowl is being delivered to the hotel this very night. What? Sunny asked. How? Klaus pulled his commonplace book out of his pocket and flipped to the notes he had taken on what the Baudelaires had observed. By crow, he said. Crow? Violet said. It would be the first time crows have carried something important, Klaus said, reminding his sisters of the crows in the village of foul devotees who had brought the Baudelaires messages from the Quagmires. That's what Esme Squalor had been watching for with her vision-furthering device. Excuse me. Sorry, I've been up early this morning on my day off, so went to the gym, ran errands, came to the house, cleaned up, got lunch, been moving, so pardon me. JS2, Sonny said, remembering either Frank or Ernest had said something about watching the skies. And that's why Carmelita Spatz had me fetch a harpoon gun, Violet said thoughtfully, to shoot down the crow so VFD can never get the sugar bowl. And that's why either Frank or Ernest had me hang bird paper outside the window of the sauna, Klaus said. If the crows are hit with the harpoon gun, they'll fall into the bird paper and he'll know that the delivery had been unsuccessful. But was it Frank who had you lay out the bird paper? Violet asked. Or Ernest? If it was Frank, then the bird paper would serve as a signal to volunteers that they have been defeated. And if it was Ernest, then the bird paper will serve as a signal to villains that they have triumphed. And what about the sugar bowl? Klaus asked. The crows will drop the sugar bowl if the harpoon hits them. He frowned at a page of his commonplace book. If the crow dropped a heavy object like that, he said, it will fall straight down into the pond. Maybe no, Sonny said. Where else could it land? Violet asked. Spunsicle, Sonny said, which was her way of saying laundry room. How would it get into the laundry room? Klaus asked. The funnel, Sonny said. Frank said, or Ernest. So they had you place a lock on the laundry room door, Violet said, so that nobody could get to the sugar bowl. But did Frank have Sonny activate the lock? Klaus asked, or Ernest? If it's Frank, then the sugar bowl is locked away from any villains who want to get their hands on it. But if it was Ernest, then the sugar bowl is locked away from any volunteers who ought to get their hands on it. JS, Sonny asked. JS is the key to the entire mystery, Violet agreed. Esme Squalor thinks JS is spoiling the party. Sir thinks JS is hosting the party. Hal thinks JS might be here to help. Kit thinks JS might be an enemy. And we still don't even know if JS is a man or a woman. Like blind men, Sonny said, with elephant. We have to find JS, Klaus agreed. But how? Trying to locate one guest in an enormous hotel is like finding one book in a library. A library without a catalog, Violet said quietly, and the three Baudelaires exchanged sad glances by the light of the frog-shaped lamp. The children had uncovered countless secrets in libraries under the most desperate of circumstances. They had decoded a message in a library while a hurricane raged outside and had found important information while a sinister person chased them around a library in wicked shoes. They had discovered crucial facts in a library that held only 3 books and obtained a vital map in a library that was only a pile of papers hidden beneath a table. The Baudelaires had even found the answers they were looking for in a library that had burned down, leaving only a few scraps of paper and a motto etched in on iron archway. Violet, Klaus, and Sonny stood for a moment at the concierge desk and thought of all the libraries they had seen, and wondered if any of the secrets they had discovered and uncovered would help them find what they were looking for in the perplexing library of the Hotel des Numéros. The world is quiet here, Sonny said, reciting the motto her siblings had found, and her words echoed in the lobby. They heard a noise above them. A quiet shuffling from the enormous dome, scarcely audible over the sound of the croaking frogs. The shuffling grew louder, but the Baudelaires could see nothing in the darkness over their heads, which was as dark as a crow flying through a pitch-black night. Finally, Violet lifted the frog-shaped lamp as far as its cord would allow, and all 3 children removed their sunglasses. Faintly, they could see a shadowy shape lowering itself from the machinery of the cloak, using what looked like a thick rope. Mystery of the clock. I'm sorry. It was an eerie sight, like a spider lowering itself to the center of a web, but the Baudelaires could not help but admire the skill with which it was done. With only a slight shuffle, the shape drew closer and closer until at last the children could see it was a man, tall and skinny, with his arms and legs sticking out at odd angles as if he were made of drinking straws instead of flesh and bone. The man was climbing down a rope he was unraveling at the same time, which is an activity I do not recommend unless you have the proper training, and unfortunately the best trainer has been forced to go into hiding ever since a certain mountain headquarters was destroyed by arson. And now he earns his living doing spider imitations in a traveling show. Meanwhile, the man was quite close to the ground, and with an elegant flourish, he let go of the rope and landed silently on the floor. Then he strode toward the Baudelaires, pausing only to brush a speck of dust off the word manager, which was printed in fancy script over one of the pockets of his coat. "Good evening, Baudelaires," the man said. "Forgive me for not revealing myself earlier, but I had to be sure that you were who I thought you were. Must have been very confusing to wander around this hotel without a catalog to help you." "So there is a catalog?" Klaus asked. "Of course there's a catalog," the man said. "You don't think I'd organize this entire building according to the Dewey Decimal System and then neglect to add a catalog, do you?" "But where is the catalog?" Violet asked. The man smiled. "Come outside," he said, "and I'll show you." "Trap," Sunny murmured to her siblings, who nodded in agreement. "We're not following you," Violet said, "until we know that you're someone we can trust." The man smiled. "I don't blame you for being suspicious," he said. "When I used to meet your father, Baudelaire, we would recite the work of an American humorist poet of the 19th century so we could recognize one another in our disguises." He stopped in the middle of the lobby, and with a gesture from one of his odd, skinny arms, he began to recite a poem. "So oft in theological wars, the despots, I ween, rail on in utter ignorance of what each other mean, and prate about an elephant not one of them has seen. The words of the American humorous poets of the 19th century are often confusing, as they are liable to use such terms as oft, which is a 19th century abbreviation for often, despots, which refers to people who are arguing, ween, which means think, and rail on, which means to bicker for hours on end, the way you might do with a family member who is particularly bossy. Such poets might use the word prate, which means chatter, and they might spend an entire stanza discussing theological wars, a term which refers to the arguing over what different people believe, the way you might also do with a family member who is particularly bossy. Even the Baudelaires, who had the work of an American humorous poets of the 19th century recited to them many times over their childhood, had trouble understanding everything in the stanza, which simply made the point that all the blind men in the poem were arguing pointlessly. But Violet, Klaus, and Sunny did not need to know exactly what the stanza meant. They only need to know who wrote it. "John Godfrey Saxe," said Sunny with a smile. "Very good," the man said, and he walked across the shiny, silent floor of the lobby, pulling the rope down from the ceiling and tucking it into his belt. "And who are you?" Violet called. "Can't you guess?" the man asked, pausing at the large curved entrance. The Baudelaires hurried to catch up with him as he turned to exit the hotel. "Frank?" Klaus asked. "No," the man said, and began to walk down the stairs. The Baudelaires took a step outside, where the croaking of the frogs in the pond was considerably louder. Although the children could not see the pond through the cloud of steam coming from the funnel, Violet, Klaus, and Sunny looked at one another cautiously and began to follow. "Ernest?" Sunny asked. The man smiled and kept walking down the stairs, disappearing into the steam. "No," he said, and the Baudelaire orphans stepped out of the hotel and disappeared along with him. And that is where we will end for today. I know this is going to take some getting used to. I'm probably going to have to face the camera towards the window so the light can hit my face. But that's all I have for you today, lovelies. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon. I love you all very much. Peace, love, and hair grease, happy people. I'll see you later. Bye-bye, love. Bye-bye.